Well, good morning. As you know, one of our strategic plan goals is equity, fairness, and justice for all learners. This goal has three measures of success: decrease disproportionality in suspension and expulsion rates, increased achievement rates for traditionally underperforming student groups, increased timely access to rigorous courses, programs, and interventions for traditionally underperforming students. Today we're going to work on that goal. Our data clearly shows that we need to close our achievement gap and reduce the disproportionality in behavior events. Although there are a variety of reasons for these differences, many of which are out of our control, we need to start having conversations about what we can change internally and how we can better address these student needs. Because today's topics are focused on race and bias, the conversations will be difficult and hard at times. So please keep in mind that our goal today is not to point fingers or lay blame. It's to start a dialogue about how these factors affect our students' ability to learn and what we can do to overcome them. I encourage you to keep an open mind, participate in the roundtable discussions, and commit to keeping that conversation going. And now I'd like to introduce Ken Nixon, our coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and he's going to take you through the rest of the program today.
Thank you, Mr. Polito. I appreciate that introduction. And my name is Ken Nixon. I'm the coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion for Erie's Public Schools. My role in the Erie's Public School District, one of the parts of my role, would be supporting Goal 4, which is part of our strategic plan. So our strategic plan, we have 5 goals. Goal 4 is equity, fairness, and justice. Before I move any further, I wanted to just take a moment to speak to each and every one of you that have taken the time to view this video today, and just to let you know that we're going to start to talk about material that will be sensitive, material that will be challenging, but we're going to continue that we're going to get through this together by starting courageous conversations and supporting one another through this. So what I'm asking each and every one of you right now is to put, maybe you have a child that's at home sick, maybe you have to grade papers, maybe your husband's, blowing up your cell phone right now, but what I'm asking you to do is just kind of push that to the side and put your focus in on our conversation, which is going to be about examining our bias. And together, we're going to support each other, and it's going to take some time, but through courageous conversations around bias and race, we will strive and make progress. So Goal 4, equity, fairness, and justice for all learners. 3 focuses for Goal 4. One would be equitable treatment of discipline and referral processes. We have started a lot of this work currently, and on August 14th, we started this work with our building administrators, looking at events and resolutions and having conversations around bias, racial bias, and cultural competence. The second focus would be examining our bias. The third focus is family engagement. And through family engagement, we're doing some of this work now with our community schools model, our student assistance program, our school-wide positive behavior support programs, but it's going to be continued work and looking to work differently and being more open and welcoming to our families into our schools and for us to move out to our families. The focus of this in-service is on examining our bias. So with that, let's begin. Many of you right now are sitting there thinking, why? Why do we have to start this conversation about examining our bias? I don't come with any biases. This might be news or a shocker to you, but every single person that walks this earth has a bias. Your bias may not be focused strictly on race, but your bias could be about people that may be overweight. Your bias could be about people that are short. Your bias could be about people from different countries. So there's multiple different types of bias. We'll focus on implicit, unconscious, and racial bias. So, why? And as you're looking at the slides, bias and equity of academics and achievement is seen by having low expectations of students, not having that belief in you that that student can succeed. Bias and equity of discipline referrals and processes, they start from preconceived thoughts and beliefs that when an African American or black student enters your classroom, that right away you're going to have a hard time. Things are going to be difficult. That student's going to act up, going to be bad, going to be a negative situation. Bias and equity of discipline referrals and processes, again, what does that look like? Why? We're discussing the adult's lack of cultural competence that could lead to assumptions that all African American black students are loud, obnoxious, lack respect. Some of the things that we've heard or had conversations around previously. Discipline of African American black students, events, resolutions. We've had these conversations, as I stated earlier, on August 14th. We met with the building administrators and we dug deep into conversations about behavior events and resolutions and the amount of disproportionality between our black students and our white students. So you see this elephant, and hopefully you get my gesture. What I'm trying to say is, what's the elephant in the room? And there could be multiple elephants. I mean, honestly, on this slide, I had about 20. But we have to focus on one. And where this elephant in the room comes from is from conversations with people. In my new position as diversity, equity, inclusion, I've got to speak with multiple teachers, principals, outside stakeholders from different districts, different organizations. And one thing that comes down to the elephant in the room is, you're telling me I can't discipline a black kid. It seems to me when we talk about disproportionality and we start making comparisons of black students to white students, as I said in the beginning, it's a sensitive, challenging topic that can cause contention between people. But what I'm telling you right now is that we are not saying that. There's going to be situations in which they're going to have high levels of escalation, level 3 behaviors, and those are going to lead to immediate suspensions. Some of those would be fighting, weapons, drugs, some of the really high level offenses. If it's a black student that's involved in a fight, if it's a black student that's involved in weapons, then that student would have to be consequenced accordingly. Disruptive behavior, that's one we talk about often, chronic disruptive behavior. And we see that time and time again from our behavior event data, that's sky high when it comes to black students. So what are we going to do to support that? Can we discipline those kids? What we have to do is, first off, we have to focus on first-person language when we're speaking about students. And when I say that, as recently attended a conference with Dr. Sagai, who is the godfather or father of positive behavior support. And that was one of his biggest pushes in this conference was first-person language. So we can't say that we have tier 2, tier 3 kids. We have to focus on saying that we have students, we have kids that need tier 2, tier 3 supports. And so with that conversation, would those kids need to be disciplined? More than discipline for those students, we need to look at what supports we're layering in the classroom and building wide. So we do have trauma-informed care. We have our emotional support students that have FBAs and positive behavior support plans that are immediately tier 3 students. We have mental health needs, SAP, Student Assistance Program, and satellite services in our buildings to help with supporting those tier 2, tier 3 students. One thing that I wanted to share with you is based on the MTSS model, which is multi-tiered system of support, which is the triangle that most of us see when we look at our response to intervention academics or behavior supports. We have to start looking at all of our kids being tier 1. Even if they are looked upon as needing tier 2, tier 3 supports, we have to look at all of our students as being tier 1, needing tier 1 supports. So when we talk about tier 1, we're talking about that 80% of our school building that will follow and do what they're asked to do. And if not, that's why we implement certain programs that's why we implement frameworks, like school-wide positive behavior. That's why we have programs like responsive classroom. Those types of programs, restorative practices, multiple programs that I could mention, OVEUS, bullying prevention, programs that are layered in to support those tier 1 students that will catch them before they move up to the tier 2, tier 3 level. So again, I just want to reiterate to all of us that we're not saying you cannot discipline a black kid. It's going to be based on the level of the offense and how well we're putting supports in place before we move to just a disciplinary consequence. What we're asking for adults to be reflective, to be honest, to be open, and just be aware of your struggles. and then take steps to adjust. That's the key. If anybody's ever done any research or looked at any resources, you'll see time and time again, the only way to overcome racial inequity or racial bias is through continuous conversation and people that are open, honest, and frank with each other. That's the only way we're going to get past our bias, and that might lead to hesitation or apprehension regarding our black students. So what we're asking you to do is, there's problem starters and then there's problem solvers. So we're asking you to be a solutionist. Be willing to experience new cultures, experiences outside of your comfort zone. Learn about where kids come from. Connect with their life outside of school and build positive relationships with their families. It doesn't mean that every family or everything has to be just coming into our classrooms or into our school, but we can go out and about. We can attend events, football games, basketball games, any type of event that a student's involved in. Your ability to be present not only shows support to the student, but it also will help you with gaining an experience in a new culture or a new ethnicity that you're not familiar with. Those are ways that we will move past bias. So a lot of you are sitting here still kind of thinking through this. Why are we examining our bias? So we talked a little bit more about like the philosophical or the human nature side of things in the forefront of this presentation. Now let's talk a little bit more about how we can look at our data and what is our data telling us in regards to examining our bias. So we're going to take a look at our PASA, our PASA, our Keystone District and statewide data, as well as our own behavior data. And as you're looking here, it's very important that we have our district-wide population, our numbers and our percentages, so that you can see the clear distinction of what an achievement gap would be, meaning the scores compared to the white students, and then the percentage of students that we have. So black students, 29%. This is it, last year. 2,965 black students, 29%. 3,747 white students at 37%. And then all minority students give us about 6,300 at 63%. Gives us a whopping 10,111 students total last year. Why this is important, because again, I want you to keep 29% and 37% in the front of your minds as we go through these next slides regarding our achievement data. So as you see here, and again, thanks to Paulette Zagorski for breaking down this data, we have our district ELA percentages on the left and our state ELA percentages on the right. Now, this was not done to create you to start making comparisons regarding numbers. We're not looking at numbers of district to state data. What we want to show you is that this is not just a district problem, but this is a statewide problem. We may have some numbers a little higher in certain areas, and those are the ways that we're going to combat and work together to bring those numbers down and to give our students successful classrooms and and raise their successful achievement. So as you look here, you see the ELA percentages. Now this is district math percentages compared to state math percentages. And again, I'm asking you not to look at numbers, but just to look at the amount of red and yellow, especially by subgroup. So if we look through this in our math, in our district math and our state math, you can see where our black students are only performing at about 11% in terms of proficient advanced. In terms of, if you look up above district-wide, our white students are at 30%. But again, if you think about 29% population compared to 37%, that helps you kind of hone in a little bit more on the impact of those scores. Our IEP students and our ELL learners. So as we look at this data, it raises some eyebrows and it causes you to be a little more concerned. Algebra 1 Keystone, state, district, and state. So again, the reason why we wanted to show this data to you is not to put you on the defensive. Again, like I said in the beginning, anytime you talk about bias or race, the immediate response or anything, if somebody's being challenged about something in their classroom, if a principal's being challenged about their scores or not motivating their teachers enough, A lot of times our first response is defensive. So I want to state this again. This is not to put you on the defensive, but this is to show you that this is a problem that we're having in education, not only in our district, but statewide. But what are we going to do as a district, Erie Public School staff, what are we going to do to make the change? So our biology keystone, state and percentages, excuse me. As you can see this. And again, some things that are good to do is kind of look at the comparison and contrast, look at the different subgroups, what stands out, what doesn't. Our literature, keystone to state. So we're going to start talking about our behavior data. And our fifth grade population numbers and percentages. And again, why is that important? Because when you make comparisons of behavior events or your resolutions in terms of what is the percentage that black students account for, you want to know what the percentage of the population is. So let's keep this. For fifth grade, please keep 30% for black, 37% for white students in mind. So when we look at this is ordered in first, second, and third as far as the highest behavior events that we see for grade 5. In the middle, you have number 1. On the left, you have number 2. And on the right, you have number 3. So again, keeping those numbers of 30% black students, yet when we look at this pie, it's very evident that under disruptive behavior events, 72% of our black or African American, 72% of the disruptive behavior events falls under our black and African American students. Yet they only account for 30% of our population in fifth grade. Again, disrespect events on the left, black or African American students, 59%. And then look at the other categories. White is at 21, Hispanic is at 19, 2 or more races, Asian. The percentages, the difference of percentages are what we're talking about when we're talking about gaps. So previous slides, you saw the district data compared to the state, and that's our achievement gap. Now we're looking at our discipline gap as far as opportunity and disproportionality. The third one on our right, insubordination, 52% African American students. Again, African American students only account for 30% of the fifth grade population, yet make up more than half of the insubordination events for our district. Seventh grade population by number and percentage. 29% black students, 36% white students. Remember those numbers. So again, 1, 2, 3, 29% was our number of black students in seventh grade. That was our percentage. And number 1 with disruptive behavior events, black or African American students account for 64% of the pie. Insubordination events, 66%. And in percentage of inappropriate touching, again, this is middle school, 7th grade, black or African American, 68%. They account for that much of the inappropriate touching events. You look at the 9th grade population, numbers and percentages. So 33% black students, 36% white students, 64% for minority students as a whole. Again, numbered 1, 2, 3. In the middle, we have disruptive behavior, K8. So disruptive behavior, 33% of our student population, black or African American students, account for 61% of the pie. And I know it's repetitive and it sounds redundant, but the reason why I'm continuing to say it is just to get the point across, just to make sure that we're really grasping this message. So when people say, why do we need to examine our bias, we have direct points. Achievement data, behavior data speaks volumes on why. Disruptive behavior 1. 33% of our black students account for 84% of our disruptive behavior 1. If you're not familiar with the codes, disruptive behavior 8 is basic disruptive behavior, not PIMS reportable. And disruptive behavior 1 would be considered a disorderly conduct, just so we're clear. So 84% of our African American students at 33% of the population make up for 84% of the disorderly conducts or disruptive behavior 1. Disrespect events, 75% of the African American students, 3/4, make up for the disrespect events. for 9th grade. So district-wide population, again, we know that number, just remember that again, 29%, 37%, 29% black students, 37% white students. So now let's look at our suspensions. And our suspension resolutions by race and ethnicity. And as you see down below, the blue would be the African American students, the red would be the white students, the green is Hispanic and Latino, our purple is 2 or more races, and our light blue is Asian. And these are percentages. So alternative ed, roughly almost 70%. American students only account for 29% of the student population. Expulsions, almost 70%. ISS, over 70%. 2 or more races, roughly 62, 64% there. And then our suspensions, 4 to 10 days, would be roughly almost 70%. So 70% is a pretty consistent average, I would say, of each and every one of these resolutions, yet it's all falling under the 29% of black or African American students who make up our school district population. So the question I'm going to again lead to you is, how are we going to examine our bias? And when we focus on bias, we're talking about implicit, unconscious, and racial bias. And the number one ongoing conversations about bias, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's going to be the key. The number one thing we're going to have to continue to do is have conversations about bias, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how we're going to do that? We are going to use what's called a promise protocol, which your building principals will be going over with you in the PM as we venture into an article. And we will use this promise protocol to support our work with video and text resources. It's a great way of having a supported facilitation and will help focus our ongoing conversations around bias. Continuing our conversations, this school year, starting in November, all administrators, actually in the beginning of October, all administrators were given the book called For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood and the Rest of Y'all Too by Chris Emden. Now this book was noted at an implementers forum of over 3,000 people as being the #1 conversation starter when it comes to talking about implicit bias and making cultural connections within your classroom and your school buildings. So we are starting that as an administrative team this year. Next year, 2019-20, we will go district-wide. It will be a teacher book study where our principals will be the leads and leading you through our PLCs or ILTs or department chair meetings, and we will continue to do this work through this book as well. To have focused conversation, we have questions that were already prepared by our own Equity Inclusion Committee, which is a team of internal teachers, counselors, principals, and external stakeholders. And they have created about 2 to 3 questions per chapter that will lead us to facilitated, guided discussion around this book. So after the keynote that we're going to watch by Kate Gerson of unboundeded.org, we're going to begin our own courageous conversation within our buildings as a staff. And your principals will be leading you through what we call a table talk and share. So there's 3 questions that have been derived to help facilitate and guide conversation. 1 is going to be what stood out in this message. 2, how does this message connect to students in your classroom and building? And 3, how does this message change your approach or interaction with students in your classroom building? I thank you for your time today, and even more so for all of us as a staff, and how critical it is for us to venture into this topic. And yes, it's going to be challenging. Yes, it's going to be sensitive. People are going to be defensive. People are going to be even offended. But if we don't start the conversation, if we don't move forward, we will be the same school district that we've been over the last 20, 25 years. We're looking to improve and enhance our culture, our awareness of cultures, and also tackling the conversation around bias and moving us forward successfully. Thank you.
I want to go to school because I want to get a good education so that I can go to college.
In college, I want to study political science, and after college, I want to be in some type of branch of government.
When I get older, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon.
An engineer.
A scientist.
A criminal defense attorney.
Artist or a vet.
Maybe politics one day.
A professional volleyball player or an author of some sort.
Dermatologist.
Comedian.
Computer scientist. I really don't know. A teacher, because I see like I love my teachers.
My favorite teacher was probably Ms. Dally in 6th grade. She was my math teacher. She was always positive and she always knew what to say if I was down.
My classes are very engaging and they can often be fun. I would say the most challenging class for me is ELA because my grades were somewhat fluctuating and the text can be really difficult, and also the language and vocabulary. The transition between books was difficult, but since the topic was familiar, then I better understood what was going on. It's a lot more work, but it's worth it.
ELA is one of the most important classes that helps you later on in life. It really forces us to really think differently than we've ever thought before. It can give you a new point of view for yourself, and that can definitely influence your freedom in life.
Instead of just perceiving something one way, I could break it down and see it multiple ways.
Definitely my math classes teach me how to think strategically and how to solve problems using different methods, so I could apply that to creating my own studio.
I just feel like with math, I'm always constantly thinking or working, so it just keeps my mind active with it. I like working with numbers.
I like challenges a lot, so when it comes to graphing and stuff, if I have a problem and then if it's just hard, then I like working on it and asking people about solving it, because I don't like easy stuff. I like to be challenged a lot.
If you don't go to school, then you won't know anything, and people that do go to school ask you questions, and then it'll be embarrassing if you don't know the answer to that question. I want to get the best education that I can.
I go to school every day because I don't want my mom to yell at me personally, and for me to learn all the knowledge I need to get so I could survive.
If we don't learn about the world, we won't be able to take care of it.
It's important to take the opportunity because a lot of people don't have the opportunity to go to school, so I feel like I should do my part and come.
When I look at my teachers, I look at them like my best friend because they're always there for me, and when I am sad, they look on the bright side for me.
Our children trust us. They know we love them, and they believe that what we're asking them to do is getting them ready to go to college. My name is Kate Gerson. I am the CEO of Unbound Ed. My pronouns are her, she, her, and hers. We stand here today because all of us collectively understand that what the standards have done for us is define readiness. The standards have defined what it would look like at each grade if students were on track to become what they currently believe they are becoming. Maya's going to get us through this because in order to face what is, what has been, and what must be, we are going to have to come to terms with the fact that we haven't done it well enough yet. We're going to have to come to terms with the fact that for decades, years, months of our careers, we haven't yet figured out how to serve all of the children in our care. When we look at this deeply together, we are going to confront shame, we are going to confront defensiveness, we are going to confront anger. Why didn't they teach us this way before? Why didn't I get this in grad school? Why didn't I get this in professional development after school on Wednesdays? Why didn't I get this at the Saturday thing? Right? What we have to accept is we have to look at this with a little bit of grace as we learn together this week and throughout the rest of our careers. We have to understand that as we come to know better, we will do better. The young people who started for us today, the voices we have to hold in our hearts as we enter our day, are saying to us that I'm coming here because I think you're giving me what I need. And because of that, I'm doing what you're asking me to do, and we tell them that they're doing it well. When we give students grade level content, they learn more. What we want to talk today about is the fact that this grade level work is justice. Black and Latino students placed in gifted classes demonstrate significant gains. Students not ready for their grade when given complex text made more progress than students who read leveled text independently. English learners acquire knowledge and vocabulary faster when they are given grade level content. Passing Algebra 1 is a predictor for success post-secondary. We are working in systems where we are not living against the proof that is around us. On state assessment, students who had received grade level tasks just 52% of the time grew 3 months more than those who did not. So getting grade level tasks half the time, they gained 3 months. Students were successful on 71% of tasks overall. When their tasks were grade level, they were successful about 55% of the time. Students can do this work when it is offered equitably. This slide is one of the most compelling things I've seen in a very long time. When we give students grade level work, they can do it at about the same rates. 53% for black students, 47% for Latino, 56% for white. But we don't give students grade level work. First of all, we make our own stuff. This number is 99% of the time. When asked, what curriculum do you use? Oh, it's stuff I put together myself. And that's me, that's you, it's 99% of us. We just know this. When teachers create ELA tasks, they're not often aligned or rigorous. In fact, 6% of them actually ask students to produce more than 2 paragraphs in writing. This is an Ed Trust study that looked at 15,000 teacher tasks given to kids. Same with math. When we give students tasks, they are not rigorous enough. They are not aligned with the standards. They are not on track with those 12th grade standards you discussed. And this is taking all our time. We're spending an enormous amount of time planning alone on Sunday nights, planning in bed on Wednesday nights, planning during prep periods, planning during meetings, and we don't know how to do it. What we end up doing when we plan is we provide students with blanket reviews of things they should have learned last year. We don't yet know how to provide coherent, aggressive, accelerating, sophisticated and rigorous curriculum across the year, day in and day out. Asking students what they're doing, is it grade level, is it grade level, is it grade level? No, no, no. 81% of the time students are in school, they are not doing grade level content. When we look at the classrooms broken out by race, we're all aware of how segregated we remain as a nation. When we start looking at what is offered to students in white classrooms versus classrooms that serve largely students of color, they're 54% more likely to have grade level assignments. They're 4 times likely to have grade level lessons. They have 23% more experiences that they view as engaging. For students missing knowledge or skill, access to grade level tasks increased performance by as much as 7.3 more months of learning. So it works, but we don't do it. Why? I go to classrooms a lot. I spend a lot of times in school. I spend a lot of times just sitting in the back of the room trying to figure out what is happening, trying to understand the distance between the love in a teacher's heart, the love in the heart of the principal who supports her, the love in the heart of the coaches who support her, the intentions everybody, all the adults in the building have, and the actuality of what is going on in the room. Here's one example of something I saw this year. This is an 8th grade classroom. The Bill of Rights is a 10th grade document. though there are parts of it that are certainly appropriate complexity for 8th grade. What the teacher had done, however, which is something I certainly did, was translate the Bill of Rights for her 8th grade students into 2nd grade text. Then she was asking them questions that were 3rd grade questions. So she was taking a comprehensive document like the Bill of Rights, which articulates for young people what it is they deserve, what it is they should have access to. And then we started asking questions like, I dyed my hair green because I wanted to make a statement. I didn't think that statement would be search my backpack. A police officer stopped me and said that he was going to search my backpack because he didn't like my hair color. Do I have a right to privacy in this circumstance? That question is written at a 3rd grade lexile. Nowhere in it does it ask students to go back to the text. Nowhere in it does it ask the students to deconstruct the language of the text. Nowhere in it is it demanding that students, the next time they encounter a complex text, will they be able to deconstruct it and make meaning for themselves? It is asking them to have a conversation about green hair. A simple one at that. Here's a book I saw recently in a 7th grade classroom. It's a 4th grade lexile. It's a book called Schwa Was Here. The students were discussing a question that's a reasonable question, although it does do quite a bit of the thinking for students. Is social invisibility self-imposed or imposed by others? Students were being asked to produce an argument about this question. They were given this scaffold. I want you to just take a few minutes and talk about, remember that we're supposed to be on track for that 12th grade standard here. We're in the 7th grade derivation of that standard. If you care to look at it, that would be great, but you don't have to. I want you to talk to each other about what is going on. This is the teacher's work, by the way, not the students. This is the teacher writing the notes of what her highest expectations are for what the students will do in each section of this worksheet. Talk to each other about what's going on with this assignment, with this task. All of the students in this classroom were children of color. All of the students in this classroom, like the students in our video, believed that if they did what was being asked of them, it was getting them closer to being ready for college. They were given this worksheet. I submit to you that this worksheet is unacceptable. Not only is it doing the work of figuring out what the main idea is of this text for children, it is also constructing an argument by writing sentence frames, by writing, now say this, now do something about this, now do something about this. Just make sure you don't do that. This document, this is February, by the way, in 7th grade. This document is not producing independent thinkers who can grow up to do what those 12th grade standards said they have to be able to do if they are going to be able to go to college, as the children believe they will. This worksheet was created by someone who loves her kids. This worksheet was created probably in the middle of the night with deep devotion. That's what I felt when I was doing it. That's what I see in the eyes of every teacher I see, of every principal who is supervising that teacher, of every coach who is supporting that teacher. And yet, this is what we're doing. This is not anomalous. This is what is going on in our country right now. This is what we are offering. Here are the consequences. This is a breakdown of what it means to have a score on NAEP. If you break down grade 8 reading skills around race and what it says about who can do what, white student, well, yeah, let me say average. What the average student, which is about the same as white students actually, what average students against NAEP can do is infer character traits from story details to provide description. Native American and Latino students can evaluate purpose of a text feature in relation to the article. However, what Black students can do is recognize explicitly stated information. And then at the very bottom of this progression, at the very bottom of this articulation of what it would mean to read on 8th grade level, is English learners who cannot yet interpret story description to explain character's action. We're giving them this. We're getting that. Here's a 6th grade classroom that is a pull-out classroom for English learners. This is the work that's being asked of 6th grade students who in 2 years will need to take that 8th grade NAEP test, and in 6 years will need to show up against those standards if they are to be able to access and thrive in college. Journaling is the objective. I can recall the past simple. I can write with the past tense. I can comprehend historical text through these prompts. What were you doing last night? What were you doing right before class today? What were you doing during journal time this morning? One of the most central and mission critical things you will talk about this week is the ways in which English learners thrive when we use their language as a additive, as a power center, as a thing that can inform their own production of thoughts and ideas. When we build their content knowledge, when we build their vocabulary, when we provide opportunities for receptive and productive language work. This is not that. This is why we get scores like this. And I am not the testing lady. I am not here to talk about testing policy. I am not here to ring bells about test results. But I am saying English learners against this measure cannot read. I'm saying children of color against this measure cannot read. Do you see where the proficiency line is? If our children cannot read, how are they going to make their own country? Some more questions that were being asked of the L students. Here's how it plays out against Park. Just another example like NAEP. It's an absolute crisis. And it doesn't make any sense because we show up and work so hard and we love them so much and we believe that we're doing all of the right things. And we're just trying to unpack this problem together every day. And I'm looking at you and I'm knowing that you gave up a week of your summer to come here to think about this collectively and work as a collective to solve this problem together. And therefore, we have got to face the very difficult question of why, if we are showing up every day and leaving it all on the field, why is this still like this? And furthermore, why is it okay with us that it's still like this? Part of the answer is the fact that 80% of the teachers in this country are white and 51% of the students are not. It's not the only problem, but it's part of the problem. But this is a problem for all of us. We have all inherited a system that is functioning around racist ideas, around a racist construction of what children of color can do. And we will not get where we need to go until we start dealing with that together. Implicit bias. I'm just going to read the definition just for a moment so we can ground ourselves in it. What I'm asking of you, by the way, is to look at you while I talk about this. Right? Yes, you see it everywhere around you. I know you do. But I want you to also ask, where is it in me? Implicit bias refers to the automatic and unconscious stereotypes that drive people to behave and make decisions in certain ways. It is the mind's way of making uncontrolled and automatic associations between two concepts very quickly. So how does it look? Well, it's everywhere, for one thing. Here's one study that looked at a hypothetical third-year litigation associate who sent to 60 partners a memo. Sometimes it was labeled written by a Caucasian writer, and sometimes it was written by an African-American writer. 60 partners, 22 different law firms, so not one crazy, anomalous, racist law firm. The Caucasian writer got this feedback. Generally good writer, but needs to work on, has potential, good analytical skills. The African-American writer received this feedback, needs lots of work, can't believe he went to NYU, average at best. Same document. Healthcare's got it. Black patients with chest pain are referred for advanced cardiac care 60% less often. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely than white women to die from pregnancy-related conditions. Law enforcement. People of color make up 38% of the population, 46% of those killed by the police, and 63% of the people in the country killed while they are unarmed. There are racial disparities in incarceration. The imprisonment rate for black women is twice that of white women. Though black and Latino people make up approximately 32% of the US population, they comprised 56% of all incarcerated people in 2015. The housing industry exhibits bias. You're looking for a home, you're going to see 12% fewer vacant rental properties if you are a person of color. Political fundraising, candidates of color raise 47% less money. So it's everybody else, but we're here for the children. It can't possibly be manifesting in us. Here's a study. 132 preschool educators watched a video of preschool and were asked who would require most of your attention. 42% said the black boy. 13% said the white girl. Nothing happened in the video. Black and Latino students are suspended at disproportionately higher rates. They are enrolled in gifted programs, disproportionately lower rates. They're enrolled in AP classes, disproportionately lower rates. They're enrolled in high-level math and science classes at disproportionately lower rates. This is about stigmatization. So this is an old study, but a study we hang on to because it very clearly articulates what happens inside us when this goes on. Teachers who stigmatize types of students modify how they teach, evaluate, and advise, leading to poor educational outcomes. These are all images of teachers who are our friends. Literally, our friends, I mean, actually our friends. These are all teachers who are showing up every single day with love and intention. So I'm not demonizing strangers here. I'm not even demonizing the people who you think are assholes who work in the room next to you. They need our love too. But in these images, I want you to see yourself. Even if they're not people who look like you, I want you to see yourself. None of these teachers is trying to hurt anybody. Every single one of these teachers is showing up with everything they have, and it's not working. We continue to get the results we have, even though we love them, and even though we plan so often. We stigmatize our students. We look at our students in a way that expects less of them when they are not white. This is a phenomenon that is real. It is happening all the time. You cannot be cured from it. White people in particular, I want to say this to you. If you are under the impression that there are good white people and bad white people, you're wrong. We don't get a sticker. We are never done. We don't get to say woke either. Because this awakening will take a lifetime. And you must open yourself to be confronted with more and more and more information about the ways in which your beliefs, to which you don't necessarily have access, and your behavior, which you don't necessarily see, is informing your work day in and day out, is informing the conversations you're having with your colleagues, is informing the conversations you're having with your students. So everyone in this room, we are here together. We represent, if I may borrow from a recent and important song, "This is America." This is our room. This is our country. This is our hotel. We are coming together to represent this nation. We are from all over it. This is America. We are America. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, which America are we going to cause? Because the America we have right now is unacceptable. And I'm submitting to you that doing our part in causing a different America means looking very closely at the details of what we're doing every day. We have had reform after reform after reform in this country. So many Supreme Court decisions. 1947, Mendez versus Westminster. Here's a bit of language from that decision. A paramount requisite in the American system of public education is social equality. Brown versus Board. We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Lau versus Nichols, where inability to speak and understand the English language excludes ... children from effective participation in the educational program offered by a school district, the district must take affirmative steps to rectify in order to open its instructional program to these students. This is a long one. I'm only going to read the first sentence. This is Plyler versus Doe. This is 1982. Decade after decade, we are getting these decisions. Illiteracy is an enduring disability. The inability to read and write will handicap the individual deprived of a basic education each and every day of his life. I want you to read that sentence again, knowing that what I mean and what you need to mean by illiteracy is cannot read grade level texts independently, by myself, when I go encounter a new one, away from you, outside of your care, without your scaffolds. Literacy that informs freedom is this: the ability to read and write so that the individual is not deprived of basic education each and every day of his life. Students must be in a position to go forth away from us and forge a new nation. And yet right now, despite those reforms, this is where we are. And it's not an achievement gap. It's a provision gap. It belongs to us. It belongs to the grown-ups. As you're talking to each other this week, watch the extent to which your language does not become about your children. Even in the state of California where we stand, there is a provision gap. We can no longer talk about the students who are low performing, the students who are struggling, the students who can't do this and can't do that, how hard their lives are, how much they suffer elsewhere. When we are talking about what they need to learn, we need to keep focused on whether or not it's grade level work and whether or not we're supporting them to accelerate against the ability to be able to do that. Compassion and wraparound services and supports on every other level is mission critical, and we know that too. But when we are talking about instruction, we cannot make excuses for ourselves or for our students. We must talk about our behavior, our offerings, what is in our locus of control. What do we have in us that we can use to provide what is necessary in order to ensure that these numbers stop? Inequitable schools in America have dire consequences for students of color. So it's not just that the numbers suck, it's also that what happens next sucks. Students leaving school with no diploma, 8% of them are black, 11% are Latino, 21% of them are Latino born outside of the United States. This starts early, by the way. This is just about 9th grade, 10th grade when they drop out. 1 in 4 black and Latino students not reading proficiently in 3rd grade will not graduate on time. If they don't show up in 3rd grade ready to read to learn, The same kids who can't read to learn in 3rd grade are not doing well by 9th, and they are far more likely to drop out. This is a collective. This is the country. No matter what your role, no matter what grade band you're in. Even with a diploma, young people are unprepared for college. They're taking debt accruing, non-credit bearing remediation courses at incredibly faster rates, students of color and students living in poverty. If a student takes one remedial course in college, which costs money and gets no credit, the likelihood of them dropping out with debt and no degree goes up exponentially. And it grows from there. So you have students leaving college with new debt, with no degree, in the same position they would be. Slightly better. They're 60 times more likely to be unemployed when they have some college, 60 times more likely than folks who have a college degree. 84% times more likely if they only have a high school diploma. Their earning potential is affected. So what's going on? Like, why is it so bad? Here's a quote from Ron Heifetz's book. He says, and he's quoting his friend Jeff Lawrence, "There is no such thing as a dysfunctional organization because every organization is perfectly aligned to achieve the results it currently gets." We are living in a web. I'm going to use this word and it's going to freak some people out. I'm going to say it anyway. And we have to start saying it more to each other because it's what's true. When we say white supremacy, we are not talking about lunatics in hats. When we say white supremacy, we are talking about a web, a system that we inherited and to which we contribute daily, collectively. This system, which is deeply informed by white supremacy, is a net that acts together to keep those numbers where they are. And it's not just in school. So this stuff is isolated, it seems, moment by moment, but it's part of the web too. Charlottesville was a moment in this country, as are, quite frankly, every one of these. It's a moment in this country when white people get to say to themselves, I have to say my mom didn't know what this was about, so she didn't say anything to herself. Nor this, nor this. This one maybe. It might have gotten loud enough. But for sure, white people all over the country knew about Charlottesville. But whichever of these photos got you the most, or that moment in time got you the most, white people all over this country, in reaction to these experiences, we say, well, that's not us. That is not me. I am a part. Remember, we think there's a dichotomy. Good white people and bad white people. Those are the bad white people. I am one of the good white people. So track that, because that's not what I'm talking about when I say that there is racism in every single white person in this room. And I know that's another word that just shuts you right down. My mom said you cannot invite people to a hotel and call them racists. She's a former teacher, by the way. She's like, they're not going to like that. I am saying we are carrying racist ideas around in our bodies and minds, and we are executing them not like that, in a way quieter way, in a way that is about micro decisions. These are macro decisions. These are decisions on larger scale. These are decisions we can watch on TV and about which we can feel disgust, about which we can feel a call to action, and that may manifest for you personally in a lot of different ways. But I am saying to you that if this racism bothers you, this racism needs to bother you. And the teacher who did this would never identify as such. And it's important to say, it's not just you, it's me too, it's all of us. We're walking around with this thing. We are all carrying and executing in our own way these ideas, these constructs. And look, these constructs are manifesting. This teacher said to me, I have translated the Bill of Rights into student-friendly language. They were they were 8th graders reading 2nd grade. In some cases, some of the words in the translation were off the chart. There was no lexile for them. So rather than reading a complex phrase and deconstructing it and making meaning out of it, they were being told what it meant. Students are being asked about their lives. Students are being given, this is an example of a 2nd grade classroom that when deconstructed is actually a kindergarten level task. They are being given texts that are far below the complexity of their grade. They are being given tasks that are scaffolded to the point where there is no possibility of them thinking or producing at grade level. So what do we do about it? We believe we have a shift that we all could make, and that if we went home and talked to our colleagues about this shift, that we could cause a real virus in this country that could really attack this problem collectively. That business about never doubt that a small group of people could create significant change, that's you. You were sent here by your districts because we asked them, who in your town has positional or relational power? Who in your town can learn, can know better, do better, model for others, and cause change where they live? And they sent you. So what do we do? What do we do together? What do we do about this crisis? What do we do about the fact that we're hurting children when we mean to be helping children? We've got 5 charges. We've got 5 ideas. We've got 5 things that we believe if we all did them together, we could change America. We could change our country. The first one, and this is the nerdiest part, adopt aligned curriculum. This is a technical fix. It does not require so much emotional work. It gets emotional, I'm aware of that, but get over it. Please, could you just adopt aligned curriculum? It's free. It's there. It's good. You can supplement it, you can add to it, but use the backbone of aligned curriculum to get done what you need to do, because there is study after study after study that says it will make things better for your children. When we look at teachers planning lessons, we just did a study internally. When you look at teachers planning lessons, I'm guessing it's true for all you, because it sure was true for me. The only thing I'm concerned about when I'm planning a lesson is tomorrow, is the lesson I'm planning. One of the things about aligned curriculum is that it is coherent across days, across weeks, across units, across years. We don't know how to do that because we're thinking about tomorrow. And we don't always know how to write, as Ed Trust told us, we don't always know how to create assignments that will hold students to a grade level rigorous bar. We just don't. Here's a cool detail. The impact of an aligned curriculum on student performance is equal to the impact of an effective teacher. In fact, when I was first hired to work on the Engage project, I was like, curriculum? For what? I want to talk about effective teaching. I'm a teaching and instruction gal, right? And my boss at the time said, no, you have to write it down. The teaching and learning has to be written down in a way that is rigorous and aligned with the standards. And it turns out that using unaligned content has a larger negative impact than the impact of an effective teacher. Engage is working. Teachers are seeing impressive strides. Majority of teachers using Engage report that their curriculum helped change their teaching. There's far more detailed versions of this. Teachers are learning more about the standards. They're learning more about how to teach complex text. They're learning more about how to do less obsessive focus on procedure and math and more of a balance with conceptual understanding. Aligned content will teach us how to teach this way. But we're not using it, and we're using it even less in low-income communities. We're getting most of our stuff on the interweb. I don't mean just like I think. I mean, we are getting most of our stuff from the interweb. If you Google the thing you're trying to teach tomorrow, how many do you get back? How many lessons? Thousands, right? Most of them are real crap. And it's because they're written in isolation, and it's because the people writing them were not necessarily calibrated against the standards. It is not because the people who wrote them did not care about students. It is not because the people who wrote them weren't trying hard. And it doesn't even mean the people who wrote them don't understand the math or don't understand the book. It is because writing aligned, coherent, comprehensive, standards-based curriculum is really, really, really hard to do, and it takes about 1.5 years to get good at it, and one lesson at a time ain't it. Ed Reports, I'm not sure if you're aware of Ed Reports, has reviewed a bunch of this stuff, has told you what's good, what's kind of good, and what's not good. It's like a Consumer Reports for us. Otherwise, we'll be using this stuff. You can get it off our website, unbounded.org. We've got all of the good stuff collected for you. And just use it. Like, just stop. Don't let the use of aligned curriculum take away your sense of autonomy or your sense of independence or your sense of creativity. These two things are not contraindicated. You can do this work with aligned curriculum as the backbone of your plan and serve your students. Attend to the language of the standards. You spent a minute this morning looking at the 12th grade standards. When you are teaching or supervising, and you're going to spend a lot of time getting smarter at this week, when you are teaching or supervising or coaching or providing extra support, have the app in your hand and look at the language of the standard. And when you're having a conversation with each other as teachers or with a teacher from your role, have the standard out and look at the language of the standard. Did we get every child in this room farther against this standard today? The third charge is talk about race systematically. What I mean by that is make a very serious commitment to talk about racism and its systems in our country on an extremely regular basis. It will be hard, it will be uncomfortable. White people, we start crying when this happens. It's a phase, keep going. Move through it. It's not helpful, it'll come anyway. Keep going. We have got to awaken collectively to how bad it is. White people in this country right now, and I will speak just for a moment directly to white people, of which I am one. We grew up not knowing about this, really. We are sitting as adults really not understanding the complexity and nightmare of the way racism currently exists in our country. We are currently able to check in and check out of conversations about race. Our colleagues of color and the students we serve are not able to do that. So if we don't, as a collective, and here I mean all of us, commit to pushing through how hard it feels to start doing this, we won't get to the other side of it, and we won't be conscious enough of what is in play all the time, every day around us, and we won't be in a position to cause the change that we need to for our young people. You have so much power. Even if you see yourself positionally as like the bottom or near the bottom of a hierarchy in a system, even if you see yourself in the middle or near the top, you're not taking advantage of how much power you actually have. Every single one of us can be a leader in this. Every single one of us can take responsibility for saying no. Together, we are going to talk about racism. Together, we are going to talk about what is happening systemically around us in other systems, and we're going to talk about the history of it, and we're going to talk about what is happening in this building. We're just going to name it. And by the way, if we're talking about race, don't use other words. Right? Don't use words like disadvantaged. Don't use words like urban. Don't use words like those kids. And don't use words like poor. Because though many of our students of color are living in poverty, this thing we're doing to our students through school transcends poverty. Students of color who are living in an affluent context are experiencing the same biased instruction and the same biased access to opportunities that the students who live in our highest poverty districts. That's just real and true. White people live separately. We choose to live separately. If a neighborhood or a school becomes 13% populated by people of color, we leave. 75% of white people don't have any non-white friends. There is new research that says if we cope with this, grab it by the reins, talk to each other within racial groups and across racial groups, this will move. We'll get better at it. We'll have more comfort in it. Our team has constructed a scope and sequence for these conversations We have a collection of documentaries, readings, discussion questions that you can get together and talk about race as a collective, as a group of people committed to understanding it so that we can tear it down together for our children and for each other. Because racism as it currently exists dehumanizes all of us. So use our toolkit. And then white people will say, "Are you sure?" And I will say also, people of color will say it too. Like, I'm not really all that interested in unpacking this with these people. But we've got to. There's no other way, really. There's no other way. There's no way out but through, right? And otherwise, as it currently stands, we are enacting the very thing Martin Luther King warned us about and was complaining about regarding his contemporaries. I have reached the almost regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. I would rather be comfortable and peaceful away from it all than deal with it. I'm saying here this week, that's not a choice. We need you to plug in. We need you to join us in this conversation because we firmly believe that the intersection of anti-racism work and standards work will set our children free. It's time now. There's no other way. We've got to embrace it. And as we do, we're gonna have to look in the mirror. So we as an organization have a commitment to each other to consistently talk about this and talk about this and talk about this together. And one of the ways that's happening is that there is more space for the truth about the reality of the situation to come out. There is more space for the reality of the ways in which white people who work at our organization are hurting people of color who work at our organization. There's more space and more learning and knowledge for the white people to call each other out when they hurt people of color with whom we work. There is more space for people of color to speak their truth and to be acknowledged and respected and believed. We have to build these kinds of spaces together. If you commit to doing this, you will be uncomfortable, and you won't be able to look at yourself the way you do before it starts. No matter what you look like, you will have to confront things that you didn't plan on confronting. You will have to confront things that you thought were firm and that you thought would keep you safe and whole. You will have to confront things that you did that hurt people. And that feels terrible. But one of the things we've learned together is that there's a cycle to this work. There's a cycle to these conversations about race. There's a cycle that starts with defensiveness, right? Because the first thing we do when we're confronted with behavior that has hurt another is to say, no, I didn't mean it like that. I mean, all our friends at the pool and in the park and in the street with the child selling water, right? Like all of our friends there end up saying, I didn't mean it like that. And that's what happens. That's what I do the first time someone says something about a thing I've done or said, which will happen after I get off this stage, by the way. And the first thing I'll say is, no, that's not what I meant. Defensiveness will happen first. And then one of the things we hold each other to at Unbound Ed is the idea that both things can be true. You can have not meant it, and it can have hurt the person anyway. You can not hold hatred in your heart, and you can be complaining about some other aspect of the situation, like how you were told or the process that went down around it, or the relationship that other people have anyway, right? Like there's all kinds of things we can say, but. That can all be true. Might not be, but it can be. And this person is hurt. You know, in a relationship, in a marriage, like you don't get to tell the other person how they feel. This race work works like that too. We don't get to tell each other how we feel. We get to shut up and hear each other. And doing so will require looking in the mirror. Charge 5 is commit to adaptive change within the shifts. What we have done for you this week is build a program that is wrapped around this intersection. We have laced conversations about equity, by which we mean conversations about race. We have laced equity work into our conversations about standards, but because what will come up in all of us at some point as we talk about standards work is, I get that, it makes a lot of sense, but you don't know my kids. And when we do that, when it rises, go ahead and say it out loud. Let's deal with it together. But what we have to hold collectively as a community this week is the possibility that when that idea gets raised, it is coming from a place that is informed by unconscious bias. What do you really believe the children in front of you can do? And in order to do that, we're going to have to change. Right now, we have accomplished so many technical changes. There isn't a school represented in this room where the children don't have text open on their table, where the teachers aren't asking the children to pull evidence from the text, where there are fewer and more focused math concepts being addressed at appropriate grade levels. All of that stuff has been accomplished. In fact, many of you do work and live in systems where aligned content has been adopted. That was the easy part. That was phase 1. We are in phase 2. We've got to launch into phase 2 together. And what that looks like is adaptive change. So really quickly, let me explain to you what adaptive change is. I'm guessing I'm the only one here who's ever been involved in a relationship that became difficult. When both parties are committed to that relationship continuing, one of the options is to go to couples therapy. And what a couples therapist might do is say, you know what? You guys don't spend a lot of time together. Go ahead, set Friday nights aside. Spend a little bit of time talking to each other every week, like you used to. Listen to each other. Get to know each other again. Get a babysitter, leave the kids at home, talk to each other. That is a technical fix. It is very unlikely that the conversations that need to happen and the changes that need to occur are going to come up on Fridays at Applebee's. Right? And so, you know, that thing that happened last summer, that thing you always do, the way you always, you know, insert the way your partner offends you. Adaptive change is deeper than the technical fixes we have yet accomplished. We have accomplished many technical fixes. We've got a bunch of the boxes checked, guys, which is why everybody showed up here believing that standards work is already in play. What we're going to ask you to do this week and forever is look at this a different way. Look at this as adaptive work. Adaptive change requires changes in values, beliefs, behaviors, habits, loyalties, and priorities. People with the problem of the work do the work. People often resist even acknowledging adaptive challenges. They can be invisible. The emotions that go on, When we try to move away from leveled text, for example, nobody has feelings about that? Right? Yeah. This is intense. We have feelings about this. Solutions often require learning something new, not simply rearranging what we already know. It requires risk-taking. It requires stops and starts. It requires new discovery. It requires pulling back and saying, this has been a mess so far. Does that mean we throw it out, or does that mean we understand the mess better? What is going on here? Are there factions of people in the building who feel a different way? Is there someone who never even accepted the decision we made? Right? Is there someone who's just going along with it because they're trying to comply? This is about our beliefs, our behaviors, our values, our loyalties, our habits, our unconscious assumptions about our children. This doesn't get unpacked in a day. So I'm saying pick a shift. You know the shifts. They're a framework. They're a bunch of bumper stickers. And we're going to use the framework this week to frame our learning, right? Like, you know this shift. Now let's actually get into it. Now let's actually get into what it would mean adaptively. What would it require in us for this to actually be true? The history text that we looked at was an ELA classroom. That teacher believed she was working with complex text and academic language. She was asking students to read, write, and speak about text with evidence, right? Like, why is green hair bad? Or like, why is a kid allowed to have green hair? Which amendment, right? Like, that felt like evidence. Intentionally building knowledge, I am teaching them about the Bill of Rights. They must know before they leave here about their rights. I've got to tell them. It's my responsibility. As their teacher, they need to know about it. Right? It's just that building that knowledge, asking children to do that reading, offering that text, was not aligned to the language of the standards. It was not informed by an examination of that teacher's bias about what the kids could actually access and do. And if I had her here with me now, I might have her here with me now, I'm not sure. But if I had her here with me now, I'd say, so what? No more, do better. We say that to each other internally at Unbound Ed when we screw things up. And I say it to you. You've got to hold that compassionate sense of yourself in your heart this week, and you've got to hold it for other people in the room. Part of what we're trying to do here is create space that is safe enough for all of us to take risks, for all of us to understand that we don't have to know everything. If you are in performance orientation, check it and step out of it. You don't have to know how to do this right now. You're here because you don't entirely know how to do this. We as a country don't entirely know how to do this. As a country, we know how to serve white, affluent students. As a country, we do not yet know how to serve students of color. We are here together to understand how to run schools that serve every child who has shown up believing we would. Here's how we'll do it. We'll have a sense of urgency because this can't wait. We will create learning spaces together as a collective in every single session this week where we are reminding each other that it is safe to not know something. If you are not raising your hand a couple times a day and saying, I don't understand what you just said, then something might be going on, right? Think out loud. Ask questions out loud. Be ignorant about a thing that just happened out loud. Absolutely no one, including myself and including any of our staff, knows everything about this. This is really hard to do, and we're going to be learning about it for the rest of our careers. We're constantly growing against the standards. We as an organization, this event as an organization, are imperfect. We will screw things up. We will let you down. You will have imperfect facilitators. You will have imperfect participants beside you. You yourself will be imperfect. Absolutely communicate it with us. We will ask you every day how it's going, and we will do everything we can to make sure you are getting everything you believe you need. But know that we know we're imperfect. And this thing, if it goes right, is going to be very, very messy. Everything you'll see and experience here is free and online. We're really excited you've come. We believe justice lies in the details of teaching and learning. We believe justice lies in the intersection of our beliefs, our expectations for our students, and our practice. And we're so excited to talk to you about all of the stuff beneath that for an entire week. Thank you so much for coming.